So you have an idea, maybe it's a cool gameplay feature, an interesting premise, or maybe even artwork or movies that inspire you. But what do you do with that idea? You write it down in a game design doc. The problem is, there are so many versions of design docs, it's hard to know where to start or how to structure them. That's what happened to me. I had so many ideas, but I just dumped them all into one giant Google Doc. It ended up being 20 pages full of random mechanics and lore. That was a bad idea. It was completely unusable and I had to start over. But now I have a new problem. How do I make a concise, practical design doc that actually helps me make my dream game and not just writing about it? In this video, I want to share a simple framework that I came up with to solve this problem. There are 3 stages of design docs you should write: idea, prototype, and demo. I'm going to go over what your focus for each stage should be and how to write them in a practical way. By the end of the video, you'll have everything you need to know about GDDs to get started. Hi, my name is Alan and I'm an indie dev working on my own tactics RPG. On this channel, I talk about game design and some of the behind the scenes for making indie games. Enjoy! If you only take away one piece of advice from this video, it should be this. A game design doc's sole purpose is to clearly communicate a game idea to the person reading it. If it's not doing that, it's worthless, no matter how good your idea is. My original 20-page behemoth was unusable because there are no filters or structure to my ideas. Anytime I thought of a new mechanic, I would just write it down as a bullet point somewhere, and it was my first attempt at a real project, so I didn't want to waste anything, but that was a horrible approach. Game design is a very iterative process. It's less about the idea and everything to do with execution. Very rarely is your first idea going to be the best one, which is why design docs should be short and relevant to your project right now. This stage is where all you have is an idea and nothing is built yet. Any changes to your design can be easily made now, but you don't really have a way to know what's good or bad, which leads to the first pitfall: putting in too much detail too early. I fell into this pitfall when I would think of a system and then spend way too much time coming up with gameplay interactions for it. For example, I would think about the combat system of my game and start coming up with a class and their abilities at each level. At one point, I even had endgame abilities written down before I even built a simple prototype. That was a bad idea because all that design goes to waste if anything upstream gets modified when you actually build it. I think the saying goes, putting the cart before the horse. In this case, I was putting the mechanics before the system.
Not a great plan.
This is why I recommend design docs in the idea stage to only outline high-level concepts, like general setting for your game, the mood and aesthetics, and some of the core systems that make up the genre and gameplay. The other mistake I made was designing without a clearly defined unique selling point and core design pillars in mind. Design pillars are essentially guiding principles or checks that your designs should pass. Anytime you have conflicting design decisions, go with the one that aligns with your design pillar and USP more, since those are the foundation of your entire game. When you don't clearly outline these, you tend to design with a "wouldn't this be a good idea" mindset, instead of a problem-solving mindset for how you can stick with your design pillars, and it leads to scope creep or design bloat. So in the idea stage, you only need a single one-pager design doc, outlining your unique selling point, design pillars, key story elements and system mechanics, and some reference images. This one-pager lets anybody know what your game is about at a glance. It's essentially an elevator pitch. Here's a real example of this one-pager done with my own game Secrets of Shadows, as well as a free template, so feel free to pause or download these in the description. This one-page limit really forces you to boil down your game ideas to a strict filter, and I think you'll be quite happy with what you end up with after cutting your ideas down into a realistic, approachable scope. With the one-pager finished, you're ready to build a prototype. It's a bare bones but playable section of your game. In this phase, you start to get a better picture of which ideas are good or bad, since you can actually see them being played out. You can build prototypes with code or even just paper and cardboard mockups, since those are faster to make. After playtesting, you can expand on the one-pager to make a more detailed design doc focusing on system and mechanics. How I like to organize this one is by setting clear design objectives at the top, followed by a brief outline of each system. This way I can make sure every system I added into my game supports my USP and design pillars. You should almost have to justify a system being included in your game, instead of just adding something because other games do it too. This is an example using the spell system for my game written in this format. Again, feel free to pause or check out the template, all that good stuff. The idea here is that in the prototype stage, it's better to get in as many rounds of iteration as possible. So you want to know exactly what you are testing and what the objective is to get the best result. It's better to focus more on system design, like game feel, which mechanics are actually fun, and how the flow of the game can be improved, rather than content design, like combat interactions, balancing, art assets, quests and narratives, and so on. In my opinion, it's also more efficient to save the more detailed stuff for later when you're absolutely sure about how your system mechanics work. The prototype stage is also the best time to kill off any ideas you might have. Figuring out which ideas to cut is always hard as a designer, so outlining your objectives clearly in this format makes it easier to see which systems are not pulling their weight. Sometimes removing them outright might straight up improve your game. If not, you can continue to rework and iterate through more prototypes. When you're happy with your core system mechanics, you can move on to the last stage, the demo stage, where you're building a vertical slice of your game. By now, you should have a clear idea of what your game is about and how it plays. It's time to polish it with content and turn it into a demo. If you're trying to make a game on Steam, it's pretty much mandatory to get a polished out demo as soon as possible, both for marketing and feedback. I'm still in this stage myself and I'm almost finished, but in all honesty, I sort of bounced between this stage and the prototype stage because I wanted to make devlogs and share my work in progress. Doing that definitely delayed my development process by months, as I ended up remaking a lot of assets for new systems. I recommend going into the demo stage after you've nailed down most of your core mechanics. From here, your game design docs will look a lot more specific to your own game and genre, so I won't include any templates. Instead, I want to share what I did for my own game and what the thought process was. So from my own experience, when you're in the demo stage, you sort of have to switch formats each time you write for a different role within the project. That means writing a clear feature list for a programmer, a well laid out mood board for an artist, or gather a bunch of reference tracks for a composer. I spent most of my time solo developing and I got away with just winging it most of the time, but now I'm working with a small team, so it's super important that I'm on the same page with them. I tried different approaches and the best thing I did was to use a system and mechanics outline from the prototype stage to make individual specs for the other roles. This keeps them clean, relevant, and concise. The one-pager and the system mechanics outline should be a doc everyone can read quickly and get a general feel for, and then you give each member a more detailed document that is more relevant for their job. A programmer doesn't need to know what kind of historical aesthetic a weapon is based off of, and the artist doesn't need to know that weapons need to be serialized in a certain format to go into the database. Separating details like that into different design docs helps when you're a solo dev too, and makes it a lot easier to plan out what you should be doing. I recommend playing around with different formats and don't always default to plain text too. Design docs with mood boards, annotated images, flowcharts, or spreadsheets might work better depending on the type of game you're making and who's reading it. The important thing here is that you can clearly communicate an idea to the reader. So now you might be wondering, how often should you update these documents? The general advice I see online is to treat design docs as living documents and always keep them up to date. But how exactly does that work? In my experience, changing your design docs too often can just be a waste of time, and it sort of creates a shiny object syndrome where you keep tinkering with ideas even if it's working already. The way this framework is set up ensures that you will rarely need or even want to go back a stage. For instance, if you're changing your design pillars when you're already in the demo stage, you probably shouldn't do that unless you really want to make a completely new game. So the changes you will be making will mostly be within each stage. Ultimately, design docs are just tools, so do whatever makes sense for you and feel free to experiment, but here are 3 quick suggestions. First, freeze all docs during production. This way you can get a clear output you can measure with instead of constantly redoing designs and getting distracted. 2, only change documents further down the stage if you really want to plan ahead. Basically, change stuff before anyone actually starts to work on it. 3, change whenever your timeline gets disrupted heavily. For example, cutting back scope to meet deadlines or budget changes. With that, there's how I would structure my design docs if I were to start over, and everything I've learned by writing my fair share of actually useful design docs along with a ton of useless ones. I really believe that game design docs are only useful as a tool to get started, so you can actually build a game instead of just thinking about it. Good luck, and check out Secrets of Shadows and the free templates if you're interested, and let me know if you have any good design doc formats too. Bye!